The Queen Anne's County Planning Commission to order for Thursday, September 14th, 2023. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comments?
No digital.
Okay. Meeting minute review.
Madam Chair, I move that the meeting minutes from July 13, 2023 for the Planning Commission be accepted as submitted.
All in favor?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it. Updates. Legislation and legal matters.
Good morning.
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 Amy Mordoff, Planning Director. I'll start with two legislative updates, and the first is that Armored Storage has received its final approvals from the county commissioners, and the map amendment affiliated with the Growth Allocation Award will be effective on the 7th of October. The Airport Gateway District update to the code, which is where we've begun our code update, that ordinance has been approved and will become effective on the 28th of October. You will see, jumping back to Armored Storage, you will see a site plan after this approval is codified, and when the applicant is ready to proceed, you will see the site plan that will then have to conform to all of the growth allocation conditions. But we haven't seen a submittal yet. So, other matters. Just to update you, the legislative session will be starting again, and so there's some ramping up that is going on. Just to let you know that we've been engaged, staff has been engaged with what is called the A-Storm legislation, and that is a program through Maryland Department of the Environment where additional best management practices will be added to the stormwater model ordinance that go up beyond the environmental site design to the maximum extent possible, which was the last update to the stormwater model ordinance and the stormwater provisions by MDE. Those were environmental site design standards that went beyond a minimum standard. Now the A-Storm model is based on LIDAR modeling that takes into account sea level rise and storm surge inundation. So we're starting to see some of the climate resiliency modeling that has been proven effective over the years. We're starting to see those guidance documents finding their way into our model ordinances, and that'll be the first example. I haven't seen the final language, but basically what the stormwater code will be updated to contemplate is an increased measurement of stormwater and rain event inundation. So, and I can't go deeper than that because I'm not an engineer. In addition, you'll recall that during the last legislative session, there was also a proposal to update the floodplain model ordinance to include some sea level rise modeling. That was unsuccessful because that legislation wasn't based on the standing FEMA requirements and didn't have a ground in any ground truth data. That group is continuing to meet to try to get it right this time, and will be looking at the A-Storm modeling that I mentioned as a guidance. So we're continuing to work with with the Maryland Association of Counties, with MACO, to be engaged in that conversation so that from an enactment perspective, when it gets to our local level, at all of the counties and municipalities levels, that it's something that is going to be consistent with our standing comprehensive plans and codes. Additionally, we are anticipating updates to housing standards in this legislative session. To that end, I think I mentioned that I had been appointed to the governor's task force of the accessory dwelling unit task force. We have our initial meeting on the 19th of September, which is next Tuesday. This task force is specifically looking at accessory dwelling unit standards, but I anticipate that the task force will be looking at affordable housing in general, ultimately. And I'll keep you up to date about that dialogue as it moves forward. And finally, there's been a new, as you know, a new chairman to the Critical Area Commission, who is Eric Fisher, and he has established critical area summits on the Eastern Shore and the Western Shore. The Eastern Shore Summit will be held tomorrow, and all of the staff involved in critical area review, which are 4 of us, we will all be attending to learn what initiatives and focus the Critical Area Commission will be taking, and we'll update you on that. There are a lot of fall events and conferences, and just to let you know what is going on the 27th of September, I've been asked to sit on a panel with the Maryland Bar Association to discuss planning. I'll be sitting on that panel with a planner from a municipality, a planning director from a municipality, and a planning director from the city of Baltimore to discuss how attorneys can best coordinate with our planning commissions and boards of appeals and staff to effectively implement our codes. So that's an exciting panel to be asked to sit on. You attending that, Chris? Okay, too bad. If anyone is interested in attending, let me know. I've also been asked to sit on a very similar panel with Forever Maryland, which is a land use conservation group. Additionally, our chair is addressing the Maryland Planning Commission Association at their 40th annual conference. I think I've mentioned that a couple times. That conference starts on the 24th and runs through the 26th. The main day of the conference is the 25th, where Commissioner Corcorino will address the attendees to kick off the conference, and Sharon will close the day with an awards ceremony at the dinner. On the 24th, which is the day before the main day of the conference, there are training opportunities. If any of you, if you do not have your training certificate, there's an opportunity to fulfill that obligation on that day. Planning staff will be giving, will be addressing the group in a work session, and also, as I mentioned, with the help of Heather Tonelli, we are putting together a really exciting tour where we're visiting some of our development sites that have been great successes and are representing a wide variety of types of development. And then the closing day is on Friday, and I think that's the day where you can attend in general, but there's an extra fee if you want to attend the Open Meetings Act training. So a lot of you have registered. If you haven't registered yet, we'd love to see great representation since we're the host county. And go ahead and register. And this is an expense that can be submitted to John Shelton for reimbursement. So please consider that. Additionally, the Maryland Association of Floodplain and Stormwater Managers annual conference is in November, and the MACO conference, Winter MACO, is in December. So,
Where is Winter Makeup?
it is held every year at the Hyatt in Cambridge. It's a very nice conference. I have a few staff updates, and one of them is you'll see that we've announced for 2 openings. One is to fill a position for our nuisance inspector. One of our nuisance inspectors is now working for the Soil Conservation District. So that was a positive move for him, but we have to fill that position, and so we're looking to fill it. We're also advertising for a new position for an office coordinator, and what we are doing is we are succession planning, which is a priority for the county. We have a lot of seasoned employees who are retirement eligible, not that we want any of them to retire, but we are training a new staff member in some of these very complicated roles in the department. We are also very seriously moving forward with our citizen self-service portal and going all electronic eventually, but making sure that applications for building permits, eventually for planning projects, and all invoicing can be handled electronically. So our database which has just been updated, really has to be up to scratch so that all of the information that we're about to share with the public, who can get logons and register and look up their own permit information, that all has to be in tip-top shape. So the staff is kind of all hands on deck right now, learning the systems and making sure that we'll be ready to unroll a really fulsome citizen self-service portal for planning and zoning within the next year, we hope.
This is to ultimately reduce foot traffic, sort of at the desk.
Yes and no. I mean, yes,
I don't mean just for that, but
Yeah.
to make it expeditious for those who choose to take that route.
yes, and to reduce paper consumption, and it's just it's a customer service demand, but I do hope people still visit the office to ask questions because we enjoy that interface and it's productive. So,
Will this allow applicants to track the progress of their applications?
yes,
Okay.
and you can do that now with building permits, but it's more limited. Once the system is fully communicating with our database, citizens will be able to sign up for their own accounts and look at more in-depth information
Great.
about your property and projects. And finally, I just wanted to mention that last evening, the Board of Appeals met, and as your partner board, I just wanted to let you know that Kenny Scott received a proclamation last evening for his 20 years of service. He suffered a health crisis a few years ago and hadn't been able to continue his participation with the board, but his service was highly admired with the board, and he was honored last night in a brief ceremony. So I just wanted to let you know that that took place. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Good morning. My name is Rob Tracy. I'm a long-range senior planner with the Department of Planning and Zoning. I'm here today to talk about the Millington Comp Plan. We received, they're in the process of updating their comprehensive plan. The Maryland Land Use article requires that municipalities and counties send out comprehensive plans for a 60-day review, allowing the public and also other jurisdictions the opportunity to comment. We received their plan, and the county's comprehensive plan technical review committee, which is comprised of other committees, other departments within the county, reviewed that plan for consistency between the town's plan and our comprehensive plan. The town of Millington is going to be holding a public hearing on September 28th to review the comments. Staff has provided some analysis and provided a draft letter to you. I'm here today to ask for a favorable motion to accept staff's comments and analysis, and for us to send that to the town of Millington so that they can review that at their public hearing on September 28th. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Tracy, thank you so much for the executive summary, if you will, for our package, because that was obviously it's a heavy lift to read through that, so we appreciate your research. And unless anybody has any questions for Mr. Tracy or Ms. Jones, I'll make a motion that we accept or what's the proper language? Accept and sign on behalf of our commission the public comment, or excuse me, the county's comments in response to the Town of Millington Comprehensive Plan as submitted on the September 14 letter dated that we had in our package.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So be it.
Thank you.
I'll mention that I'm the town attorney for Millington. And Millington, as you know, is mostly in Kent County, but parts of it are in Queen Anne's. On the Kent County side, there is significant debate, I think, among the county, the town, and the owner of a very, very large block of land on both sides of 301. It does not include the Food Lion, which is near the intersection of 301 and two, yeah. And the owner of that land has certain goals for the property that may or may not be what the town ultimately will endorse, and the county's involvement is also not exactly what the town has in mind. So this process may slow down a little bit because of the Kent County considerations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, projects. Amended major subdivision.
Jack, did you want to come up?
Steve?
Yep.
Good morning, Jeff Thompson on behalf of WD 40 Investments LLC.
Morning. I'm Steve Johnson, County Planner, Planning and Zoning. As Ms. Dobson stated, we're here to discuss project number SUB 23-08-0385 for WD 40 Investments LLC, who is proposing to amend major subdivision number 02-06-08-0015, better known as Condor Manor, by modifying the approved landscape buffer and forest conservation plan. They are requesting amended major subdivision approval to provide relief from planning the required landscape buffer under 18-1-76D and to modify the forest conservation plan. This slide gives you a general location of where the subdivision is located. As you can see, it's located in the middle of the county, just south of Church Hill. More specifically, the subdivision totals 49.274 acres and is located at Eagle Manor Drive off of Price Station Road. Property zoned agricultural. Ag cluster lots require landscape buffering. There's a little bit of the project history. In November 9th of 2006, the Planning Commission granted preliminary subdivision approval. Final subdivision approval followed the next month, December 14th, and the plat was recorded on March 2nd of 2007. The subject landscape buffer was shown consistently throughout this review process. Here's a look at the recorded plat. The subject 50-foot wide buffer shown here in brown, outlined in black. This was established according to the 2006 requirements and located on open space lot 1, which the applicant owns. There's been no planting or no natural growth. This buffer was also utilized to provide the required 2.58 acres of afforestation for the property and it was also placed in long-term protection. There's a provision in both the 2006 regulations and the current regulations that allows the Planning Commission to modify the buffer as they see appropriate. In response to the removal of this buffer that is being used for the afforestation, the applicant is establishing a 2.58 acre forest conservation or forest protection area at the north of the property. that will enhance existing woodland and existing non-tidal wetlands. Should the Planning Commission approve this amendment, the county commissioners must approve an amended forest conservation easement. And that would have to be done prior to final signature of this project. That's all I have for this. However, I wanted to make a statement before I turn it over to the applicant. We assume that this doesn't need preliminary and final subdivision approval. So I'll defer to Chris on that.
No, it's just an amendment to the final.
Okay, okay. Now that we've clarified that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jack and Mr. Thompson.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
You've seen this request a couple different times. I know I did it for Hayden Estates and Blakefield, and I think you're going to see a few more. And the reason they're coming so long after the approvals is that, of course, the market tanked in '07. And so now these projects are starting to develop out, and the adjoining farmers are coming forward saying they really don't see the need for this buffer, and that's really what it's all about. I mean, if you look at section 76D, what it says is the buffer is created to provide additional protection for the existing and continuing agricultural uses on the adjacent properties. It goes on to say that the Planning Commission may modify the requirements of this section if strict compliance would not be likely to protect adjacent agricultural lands from nuisance claims and complaints. And what we're finding is the farmers and the landowners that own those adjacent lands, don't feel they need that protection. And that's the reason it was granted last time. Mr. Schuman is here. He's one of the principals in WD-40. Dorsey Patchett is the other. And Mike Bostick is really the one that's going to till the property. Mike is the one who sold the property to WD-40. And it doesn't really show on those plats, but Mike owns all of the property, not just this open space on this property, but all of the farms all the way around it. And he's really tilling this open space just as if it was a part of his farms. And I can't remember how long, but let's just say in the deal when the property was sold, he's going to be farming that property for literally generations. So he protected the right to continue to till it, and he doesn't really see any need and any protection needed. He's in fact tilled it all these years and wants to continue to till it as it is because that buffer would take out over 4 acres of tillable land. Oh, 3.23 acres of tillable land that he just doesn't want to take out of production. That's really where they are. Mike would be here. Mike has some health issues that prevent him from being here. I do have a letter, if you'd like to see it, that he's in favor of this buffer being removed.
And that's the owner of the adjacent property?
The owner is WD-40, the same person as the developer.
But Mike is the
Mike is
owner of the adjacent
He's the actual,
property.
and everything, right, hundreds of acres around this.
But what about all the people that are going to be in that development?
Really,
They're going to like all that tilling going on and all that dust happening and without the buffer?
well, the point's always been in the ordinance, it wasn't put in for them. As the ordinance points out, it's put in for the protection of the farmer from getting nuisance claims and complaints.
Well,
So in the past,
that's
it's always
exactly
been
what
the
we're talking
standard.
about.
I'm sorry.
Right, there's 15 opinions that you're discarding because Mr. Bostic wants more tillable land, and I respect that as
Right.
as an ag community, and I understand that every acre is another, X number of dollars in their bottom line, but you've got 15 calls that are been coming into this office, potentially, and, we've heard it and seen it in all kinds of situations.
Everybody got notice, and nobody's here. So all the adjoining property owners were notified, weren't they? Yeah. They were all notified.
Oh, but they haven't lived there to see this exposure to dust and noise and,
They have. I mean, they've been through a tilling season. There's people that live there now and that their houses are there, have been constructed, have been there. So they've been there during the planting season and they'll be there during the harvest. So, and nobody's made any complaints.
I have a question.
but no one has submitted a
Eagle Matters,
letter of
another-
support either.
Eagle
Is
Matters.
that true?
Eagle
No,
Matters.
as far as I know, no.
Okay.
Eagle Matters, another subdivision that Mike Bostick actually created and developed out, and it's really, it's right there, it's in close proximity, it's the one that's adjacent to it, and he's tilled that for just as many years. I mean, we're talking, they've tilled it for what, almost 20 years, so it's never he hasn't had an issue.
Is it accurate that you're not in compliance now?
No,
Because
we're-
weren't you supposed to do the planning back in 2006 when you,
The planning's not required until the last building permit is issued, is my understanding.
where can I get that information? Is that accurate?
Is that accurate, Amy? Do you know?
I think there's a statement on the Forest Conservation that states that it's not required until 2 planting seasons after the last house is constructed, something like that. That's pretty much the language,
It's not,
as I recall from the old requirement in
My experience,
2006.
in my experience with most of these subdivisions, it was unique. When '07 happened, I know a
yeah,
number.
but this goes back to '06. I mean, it was before the bottom fell out or anything.
No, I know, what the approval was. But what happened with a lot of these projects, most of the ones I dealt with, because you couldn't sell a lot to save your neck. Everybody came in, the commissioners put in place a method by which you could ask that the bonds be waived. And as long as you agreed you would not sell a lot, they waived the bonds. They tried to make it easier on these developers because it was impossible. So a lot, and that's why so many years later, we're here now. I mean, this is just now being developed because of all of that. I mean, the market kind of dictated what we all had to do at the time.
Madam Chair, if I may, what's the estimated value of the plantings?
The original 50-foot buffer
Today,
today? Oh, I'm not really sure what it would be today. There would have been a bond posted at the time for that buffer, I assume, for whatever the cost was then. I know that the cost to provide the 2.5 acres of afforestation area, we submitted a cost estimate, and that was over $58,000 just for the afforestation, which is minimal planting compared to what the buffer's requiring with the multiple mature trees and the large plantings and the bushes. So it's a huge significant in cost difference from that 50-foot buffer as it is from the forest conservation afforestation area.
We still have to provide the forestation before you were allowed to kind of double up in that one area. You could put forestation in, and it could also serve as the buffer as well. So we're still putting in all the afforestation we're required to. It's only the buffer that you have the power to mitigate where the farmer feels that it's, won't be a nuisance claims and complaints.
So, Steve, do you have all these sheets in your presentation or just that one sheet?
Just that one.
Okay, well, on the, and you probably have it in your packet, but on the amended forest conservation plan, under the planning schedule, within 1 year or 2 growing seasons after completion of development and/or approval of subdivision, so it's either or. So is that, and it's always been understood and been the process that after the last house is built, you have 2 growing seasons to plant that buffer. And it's bonded until such time as it's all planted.
There it is right here
Right there.
on your screen, right in the middle of your
14D.
screen.
And I can tell you that when the waivers were granted for Hayden Estates in Blakefield, they were developed. They had houses on them, and there were no complaints there either, and no complaints since.
I'd like to go back a minute to the right to farm questions, which I underline this whole discussion about the residents of the building. And what comes to mind is a saying I heard once that I don't worry about the customer who's complaining, I worry about the customer who's not complaining. And the fact that we haven't heard from these people doesn't necessarily mean that they're displeased or pleased with what's going on. I think we are vulnerable if we grant this request to criticism from the residents of this development, if in fact it does become an issue with the agricultural equipment.
Well, everyone, you've got the note on the plat that
Yeah.
they can't complain about normal agricultural operations, and that's all that's being proposed here. So
Yeah, that's not gonna stop them. I'm sorry, I'm gonna interrupt here. I'm actually gonna agree with Mr. Tillman. I think there was a lot of, I'll just call it sweat equity, putting in this provision to provide buffer between residential areas and farmers. Because we found out right a while ago that it only takes one person to move in there that doesn't like the dust, that doesn't like the noise, that doesn't like the smells, doesn't like the chemicals. and all hell breaks loose around here. We put in a right to farm law for that reason. We put this buffering for a reason. And it's for that person who hasn't moved here yet. And it's not also, or also I should say, that, you know, I hear it a lot, I read a lot in the paper when developments come. And, you know, and I like Mike Bostic. I know Mike, he's a good guy. But, you know, when developments come, people start complaining about they're going to lose their view. That seems to be a big one, you know, where they think they have ownership of the view. And this is a way to stop that, to at least limit that, that they don't own the view, they own the view to the back of their property. And that's where it should stop. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be against this. I think that, you know, had I been here before, the other two you brought up, I'm not sure I would have voted for them without knowing all the facts. I understand that's being a bit presumptuous on my part. But, you know, this isn't necessarily about Mike Bostic or those people that are there now. It's about who might own that farm in the future, because it may be for sale. You can't see that far into the future. And it's also about that person who hasn't moved, that family or that person that hasn't moved into that development yet. That's all I got to say.
Right. Well, you're in the farming industry.
I am.
I don't know that if you were going to give up the 4 acres, you'd want to give up the 4 acres, but, and this isn't exactly a.
He's not exactly giving up the 4 acres. I suspect he's being compensated well for it right now.
No, you got to, we have, it's just the opposite. They're going to have to plant it at the cost.
No,
of
you misunderstand. I'm assuming, well, I'm not going to bring up names. I'm assuming he's gone into an agreement with a developer to develop this property, and he's being paid a price that he's willing to sell that property for. It's not Mike's, it's not the current owner's decision whether to have that 4 acres there or not. All right, it's the developer. He bought it knowing that that was supposed to be the way it was going to be, and that's the way it should be.
Well, in this case, just so you know, it's going to be WD-40 that would put it in, not Mike.
I understand
Mike
that,
would
Jeff.
yeah, Mike would just get the benefit from it, but let me tell you this: it's not just a yes or no today. It says you have the power to modify. Now, my understanding is the current law only requires a 30-foot buffer.
It requires 30 now, which is a heavily buffered requirement. Originally, the original cluster buffer that was required around cluster subdivisions was 15 feet, which is more than adequate to protect them from chemicals and nuisances as far as a heavily planted buffer. I don't know that there's a big difference between 15 and 30 and 30 and 50, except the cost of planting it. So I don't think it's gonna, I don't know that it's gonna, excuse me, I'm sorry. I don't know that it's gonna change the effect of the tilling and the effect it may have on those lots. That's my opinion, right or wrong.
You know, we're not talking about a lot of money here. You know, the average rental for an acre of farmland in Queen Anne County is somewhere around $150. So we're talking, what'd you say, under 4 acres, $600 a year?
Yes.
I don't think that financial impact is going to seriously threaten the financial health of this farmer.
Well, I think a lot of times you don't hear from the landowners because what would you rather look at? Would you rather look at a cornfield or you put up some buffer that isn't going to be maintained? It's going to be like a little piece, it's going to be like a hedgerow. I mean, that's what we're putting in. What would you rather look at? And as the homeowner, I'd rather put my own plantings on the back of my lot and be looking at a farm field and not blocking my views. That's just me personally. That would be my preference.
Well, as a farmer, I'd rather look at the corn, but
I know.
I make money off that.
I know.
But, you know, we're here thinking about the residents of this subdivision and how they're going to react to our modification of the buffer requirements.
In light of your concerns, I'm merely saying, as Jack's already alluded to, wouldn't 15 feet be enough? Do you really need a 50-foot buffer at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars? What are you accomplishing with 50 feet?
Isn't that the specs that you presented when you got approval in 2006?
Well, that's what was required, and all I'm saying
Okay,
is,
so if that's what was required, and if you would have planted it back then, we one, wouldn't be having this conversation, but two, it would have been paid for and not a big deal. It's gonna cost you a lot more to do it today than it did back then.
2006, nobody was going to pay for it because you couldn't sell a lot on a bet. I lived that world. Before that, I could sell 100 lots in 7 days. After that, I couldn't sell 10 lots in 2 years. It's just what
I
happened.
don't think the bottom fell out until 8, but go ahead.
Okay, well.
That's okay, that's my opinion.
Well, the point I'm making, though, is you have the power to modify, and if the current law is only 30, and you feel today that 30 is enough, should you really have to put in 50 now? So I just want to point that out.
Something else that concerns me about this conversation is, yes, there have been conversations and modifications previously. All right, so there's a hint or a lean toward precedence, but what I'm concerned about is if we do what you're asking and completely remove the buffer and put it up to that top of the map that we just saw, that staff here will be dealing with lines of people coming in to modify and adjust and change their buffers because they want to.
And you're going to. I've got a couple others that
That's
want
fantastic.
to come in.
That's their opinion, that's their opportunity, but we don't need to open up those floodgates. So it concerns me that the justification I'm hearing is so this farmer can make more money. Okay, he's been making money on it since the plan has been approved in '07, right? Because there has been nothing planted out there.
It was 06.
'06.
Go ahead.
Sure, another $600. So, yes, that's the compromise, I think, that Mr. Sylvester was suggesting, that this is, we're here for a reason. Sort of, we're getting a little bit in the weeds, and I'm concerned that if it's this project, then it's the next 16 in a row, then it's after that, and we start to sort of suffer a death by 1,000 cuts. All these little edges around the corners, 15 feet is bare minimum. A lot of ag buffers for forest, for streams are 35 and 50. That's the going numbers, and the more the better. The more the habitat, the more noise reduction you get. I'm sure there's a better noise reduction and dust reduction from 50 to 30 to 15.
But they serve a different purpose, and that purpose is, well, it's to protect the environment. This is not. Your own ordinance says it is is not likely to protect adjacent agricultural lands from nuisance claims and complaints. It's not about whether you might hear from others, and I haven't heard anybody say heard anything from anybody in Hayden Estates or Blakefield. Everybody was notified here. We haven't heard a word. Is it real or is it just perceived? I mean, it's not about.
This is real. This was signed off on for 50-foot buffer, and you guys are coming back to us and saying, can we please modify it? We were wrong, or we want to reshuffle the deck now.
We're not saying
we want
we're
another
wrong.
bite at the apple,
We're
and
not
that's
saying
concerning
we
to
were
me.
wrong. We're saying you have the power to do it if the buffer's not likely to protect the adjacent landowner. It's not about money. I never say anything about the money. It's because the owner and the farmer does not believe that it's necessary to protect them.
Well, somebody
And that's
suggested
the standard.
that
The
it's a
standard-
monetary driver for the farmer. That was one of your points that you just brought up. That it was an advantage to the farmer. And you're disadvantaging the process that is in place and the agreement that has been signed and documented.
I'm only here with the process, and the process says if the farmer doesn't feel that it's going to cause nuisance complaints and other complaints, that he can ask. And that's all we're here to do is ask. You have the power to do it. We've kind of gotten off a field on the other. Somebody asked how much it's going to cost and all that, but that's not why we're here. We're here because he doesn't feel.
Your opening statement, you did say, as one of the major things was that it was a help to the farmer not to give up tilling those three and a quarter acres.
And no farmer wants to give up his tillable land. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Right, but again, back to Mr. Sylvester's point, that conversation has already been had between the farmer and the developer, that he bought the property knowing exactly how much he was giving up and understanding, however many years ago, '06, that 50-foot buffer would be there.
Well, he also knew that this board had granted it twice before on the exact basis that I'm giving you right now.
Maybe it's time to put our foot down.
Oh, no, this wasn't that long ago. This was just a
these
few
were
years
done, yeah,
ago.
just, yeah,
This wasn't that long ago the buffers were granted. Dorsey Patch,
So
the
he's
one
come
at
to the
Blakefield
well
was the most
twice.
recent. It was probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago at the most. Yeah. This isn't ancient. They came back just as this person did. This person had no reason to believe. None of this discussion was had at the other two hearings. I'm not saying you aren't required to do it, but you have the power to modify.
I would point out
So
too
why don't we
that-
just drop the conversation and take the vote on whether we want to use that power or not?
And that's exactly
Right.
right. I'm just wanted to point out that it is modified. You don't have to say yes or no. You could reduce it if you chose to do so. I just wanted to point that out. It's not a yes or a no.
And I would point out in response to Mr. Lee that, the minimum width requirement for a forestation or to count for a forestation is 30 feet. It's not, 50 feet. So it
You
would meet
didn't
the
ask
same
for that.
requirement. Beg your pardon?
You didn't ask for that.
He was mentioning this, in regards to the size of a forestation buffer or forest requirements, and it's 30 feet. I was just pointing that
But
out.
that's not what you asked for.
No, we aren't asking for any
We're not
change
asking
to the
for anything, but
forestation.
if-
We're putting in the forestation. That was what.
Oh, you
that
are
was-
asking for a change to the forestation,
The buffer, no, just to the buffer.
That's just to the buffer. The
We are
forestation-
entitled to ask.
which is a lot less than what your buffer is.
It's just different. The forestation requirement is different than the buffer requirement. We're
Costs a
still,
lot less.
yes, it is.
Seven tenths of an acre.
It overlaps in one place, but, there's an additional forestation requirement. It's not just the buffer. As you can see, it's more than the 50 feet where the forestation is.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Can we get a motion?
Public comment.
Public comment? Here I go, yeah.
Sorry.
You do?
We do have an email, yes.
Okay. One?
Just one.
We have nobody on Zoom or anything?
No, nothing on Zoom.
Okay.
Our email comes from Jay Falstad. Dear Planning Commission, Queen Anne's Conservation Association respectfully requests that the Planning Commission carefully evaluate Condor Manor's proposed subdivision amendment concerning its buffer and forest conservation plan, ensuring that Condor Manor amendment does not represent a step backwards from the county's original forest buffering objectives. Forest buffering and forest conservation plans are crucial in support of agriculture and a healthy environment. It's imperative that Queen Anne's County support the goal planting and conserving more native trees, not less. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Fairness, that's a bit of a non sequitur, that comment. This is not a buffering requirement. I mean, it's not a forest conservation requirement.
Okay. Can I get a,
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion for the applicant's requested amended major subdivision approval to provide relief from planning landscape require buffer under 18176D and modify the forest conservation plan. I move that we deny their request.
or a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
One, two? Just the two, Kathy and Teddy? Okay. Sorry, you're denied.
Okay, thank you.
Any other public comments?
I don't have any.
Okay, I'll take another recommendation.
Motion for adjournment?